is not like just winning everything. It's being able to lose, get smacked, and then stand up, dust yourself off, and be like, okay, how do we fix this?
Hi everyone, this is Tom reporting from the LEC, and with me here is Mac, the coach of MAD Lions. How are you doing, Mac?
Pretty good.
Yeah, you have to be, I suppose. You guys just won a pretty interesting match with a pretty interesting composition. That's what I want to talk about mainly. At least at the start of the interview, we'll see where it goes. A Lux Sona bot lane. Now, you as the headmaster, the witch brewing the compositions in MAD Lions, please elaborate on Sona and Lux.
I mean, in terms of who's doing it, it's a bit of everyone, right? This week, Kaiser was pushing for Sona Lux really hard the whole week, so we played Sona Lux. Sona Lux, I mean, basically, once you get to a certain point in the mid to late game, you saw what happened in the game. You just group up, and enemies can't do anything to you, right? You just have so much shielding and healing that you basically out-sustain everything. Like in this game, once we got Baron, we actually just walked down mid lane and end the game. The game ended with their tier 1 bot tower still up. So yeah, once you hit a certain point of kind of critical mass, terminal velocity, whatever you want to call it, with Sona Lux, it's very hard for anyone to team fight against you. And we hit that point.
How did this composition get on your radar? Was it because of Cloud9, or was it already on in talks?
I think just from players solo queue. I mean, our academy team played against Sona Lux twice and lost against it twice. And obviously we watch all of our academy teams' games together. So that kind of got us thinking. And then we played a couple of games in solo queue, a couple with it, a couple against it, and realized that it was pretty strong.
Yeah. Now, when you discuss with the team, okay, guys, we think that Sona Lux might be a thing. Are your players then generally like, yeah, let's do this. This is a weird composition. We can play it, or are they also like, okay, can we actually win with this, or what's it like when you?
I mean, there are two main questions, right? Number one is, okay, what do you need in this comp? Like, if we have Sona Lux, what do you need in the rest of the comp? Obviously, you have a magic damage bot lane with Sona Lux, so you need to have physical damage elsewhere, which is why we have like the Renekton and the Hecarim in this draft. Mm-hmm. And the rest of it is basic, like aside from figuring out like, okay, what are the counters, what does it need in the comp, how do you draft it, when do you pick it in the draft, etc. The rest is just making sure that it's not something that's only working in scrims, because there are a lot of scrim picks that usually don't transition well into an on-stage environment where the games are less bloody. Mm-hmm. So that was something that I was a bit worried about before today, to be honest. Like I was a bit worried that we might just get like stomped in 20 minutes and never hit our critical mass, but didn't happen in the end.
Yeah, and it looked like, at least in the beginning, a bit like Origin was kind of reaching that snowball, right? At least in the top lane, Alfari was just really on the hunt with his Quinn and trying to pin you guys down. At what point in the game did you think, okay, now we've probably got this?
I mean, I don't think that Alfari was actually ahead in the matchup. This is a matchup where you should come out of a laning phase like 50 CS ahead. Like, this matchup is completely unplayable for Renekton. So they actually weren't really ahead at any point in the game.
No, I'm saying that he was playing very proactive in trying to pin you guys down and get that snowball going, really. And at least
they were trying.
Yeah.
They were definitely trying. That's for sure.
Was it then just in the end just this individual skill and the confidence in you guys? Okay, we know exactly how to approach this.
I mean, you have to look at it from Origin's perspective, right? Like, how many games have they played against Sona Lux this year? Probably 0. So they probably didn't really know what to do against the comp, which is part of the benefit of playing Sona Lux in the best of 1 format, right?
Yeah.
So I think this game was a little bit of a freebie, and you can't really blame Origin for not knowing how to play it. Like, we blind pick Renekton, which is a really hard matchup, into Quinn. They picked the Quinn, and they tried to snowball in at top. I don't think it paid off. Mm-hmm. Because they invested all their resources on top, and then we just kind of outscaled them. But yeah, I mean, I was a bit scared initially, like after the first dive on top, and after we had like one silly death on mid lane, I was pretty scared. But we got back into it with some creative picks, right? Like Shadow hiding in the bush and one-shotting people on Hecarim always helped.
Yeah, it's at least also a very exciting a champion to watch as a viewer, the Hecarim just ambushing people, and that's something I personally enjoy very much. Now, the second topic I want to touch on is actually that your team suffered a loss last weekend, and it was pretty surprising to everybody that, okay, but against SK Gaming is not somebody maybe people would expect MAD Lions to lose, even though SK Gaming has been doing well. Still, there was this perceived gap in performance and in skill. Did you players and do you guys shrug off those losses easily?
For sure. I mean, it depends on why, right? I think last week we went into the game with the wrong game plan. Like, we thought that our composition, like, we identified the win conditions for our composition incorrectly, and we were playing towards them. And then halfway through the game, we were like, they may have outscaled us. Because we didn't snowball correctly and we didn't identify what to do correctly, and that's just as much on me as it is on the players. Mm-hmm. But in general, bouncing back, yeah, for sure. I mean, all teams go through wins and losses, and all teams go through ups and downs. And as a coach and as a professional, that's part of your job, right? Like, that's what makes a good player or a good coach or a good team, is not like just winning everything. It's being able to lose, get smacked, and then stand up, dust yourself off, and be like, okay, how do we fix this? And just be solution orientated and be always focused on the next step. And that's the approach that we always try to take with everything. So I think we are fairly resilient. Obviously, we still have a lot of young players. And I think we're a very emotional team. If you listen to our comms, it's like really chaotic, really passionate, really loud, everyone's shouting. So there's definitely a lot of emotion going around, and that's true for me as well. So people take losses very hard. And I think that realistically, we should be aiming to win every single game as MAD Lions. That's obviously what every team aims to win every single game, right? But we should. I think that's achievable for us. And if you put me in a best of one against any team in the league, I will always come in backing us to win. Right. And so when you don't meet those expectations of yourself, that's obviously disappointing. So yeah, people take it hard, but the important thing is not how upset you get afterwards. The important thing is how well you recover the next day.
Do you have a special training or exercise in place to help your players get there? We've seen some pictures of your players before matches. They meditate and they get into this calm state. And are there any similar exercises you have for your players to get back on that right mindset?
No specific exercises. It's more about your team kind of culture and your team mindset and your whole top-down approach towards, okay, how do we deal with a loss, right? As a coach, your reaction to a loss or a win or whatever it is sets the tone for what the team thinks. Mm-hmm. And that's really, really important to identify, okay, what angle do we want to look at this from? And how do we want to frame this, right? Because you can take a loss and be like, this is the worst thing ever. This is a disgrace. This is disappointing. We suck, right? You can say that as a coach. You can.
Yeah.
Oh, good. You can. Or you can, sit down calmly and talk very specifically about what went wrong and how we can address that in the future. Was there something that we didn't do well enough in practice this week? Is there some information that we had that was wrong? Sometimes you go in with wrong assumptions, and sometimes they cost you games because you think that a certain matchup is good and it's not good, or whatever it is. And how do we work on this the next week, right? And it's always just making sure that you sit down and have those frank conversations afterwards. The overall mindset that you go into that discussion with, that is the most important thing.
Yeah. When I interviewed Orom last weekend, and he said in the interview that in his match where he played Jackstop and everybody thought he was playing well, he said, I made 2 mistakes and I got so upset and I was very emotional, and I went to my coach like, I'm so sorry that I made those mistakes. And I was like, what? Why? You won the game. So you mentioned as well that you have emotional players, which obviously has to do with the fact that they are new to this big stage environment, and they have to learn how things go, and they have to learn to deal with this, right? But I wonder, like, how, I'm not going to call them immature, but I'm just wondering, like, how mature they are. In what ways do you see these rookies already step up and take responsibility and stuff like that?
I think in terms of taking responsibility, that's something that's really important to me and all of the rest of the staff. Even as a whole organization, that's something that's really important to all of us. So that's something that we push very, very hard, and that's something that you just have to lead with example on, right? Whenever something goes wrong, we as a staff will always be the first ones to put our hands up and say, we did this wrong. This is what we need to do next week. This is how we're going to fix it. And I think that trickles down to the players. In general, I think they're all pretty good, actually. I think obviously they are all young and they are all still learning. All of us are. But I think the general mindset we have towards taking responsibility and leadership is really good. And we've seen a lot of growth throughout the team. I mean, obviously it varies from player to player, right? I think it's worth mentioning that, I mean, you mentioned Arome. He's an incredibly emotionally mature person in general. And that's, every team has kind of an emotional backbone, right? And Arome is definitely a big part of ours, of the one to always, sit down afterwards and first of all, take responsibility. Second of all, ask how we're going to fix it and be open and honest and communicate clearly with his teammates about, what the next step is.
All right, man. Thank you so much for the insight in your team. Very much appreciated. And I also spoke with Peter Dunn, in the first half of the split, and he said, yeah, Mac has some interesting or unique approaches to coaching, and he wasn't really willing to explain more about that. And I asked you for your special coaching methods, but I'm not sure. Would you give me what's the angle that you take that makes you unique from all other coaches?
I'm very soft. I'm a very, very soft coach. I as a person, I hate confrontation. I can't stand confrontation. I always have hated it since I was a kid. And when you're in a position of authority and leadership, if you hate confrontation as much as I do, obviously sometimes you have to deal with it, right? Sometimes you have to call someone out on something, but that's never going to be my first resort. And so that means that you develop a lot of techniques around how to get through to people and how to make people feel listened to and understood, and how to have honest, open dialogue with people. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have, as a culture, not just with our players, but also with our staff, we're an incredibly close group of friends. We've been working together for almost 3 years now. And that's partly because of the way that we are all on the same page with this. I mean, Peter is exactly the same, and a lot of my coaching methods are directly inherited from Peter. He is very much also kind of an empathic coach who will always, if there's a problem, rather than going guns blazing initially and saying, this is terrible, always take the time to sit down and say, why is this happening? Let's think about this from the player's perspective. Let's think about what's going through their head. Let's put this in context with recent events. Let's think about all of the additional information that we have that can help to provide some extra context for what's going on here. And then once we've figured out that, the underlying reason or anything that's aggravating or any additional stresses, then you can start to tackle the problem. Because sometimes the problem is just a symptom, and sometimes you need to go straight at the root of the problem. And once you fix that, everything disappears. Right.
So you are more of a guru rather than this drill sergeant who puts everybody in line and makes them repeat what he says.
I wouldn't use the word guru, but I would use the word listener. I think that's something that I try to do very hard. I'm not perfect. I mess up sometimes. I messed up this week a bit. But I always try to listen. And that's, I think, one of my big strengths.
All right, man. I want to thank you very much for joining me for the interview, and best of luck in the rest of the split as well.
Thank you very much.